Hello, welcome to this webinar on the role of language for inclusion. How can we strengthen language development in the Nordic languages among students from migrant backgrounds? We are live from Stockholm and we are very happy to have you all with us today. More than 270 people have signed up for this webinar from all around the Nordics and also from the Baltics. My name is Mikaela Sonck, and I will be your moderator today. I work as communication advisor for the program Integration Norden at Nordic Welfare Center, and that's an institution under the Nordic Council of Ministers. And Integration Norden serves as a knowledge bank and a Nordic hub for research within the area, within integration area. We do comparisons between the countries. We do take statistics and present it on our web. We have practice best examples, and we do webinars like today, conferences, we have networks and much more. Today's webinar is hosted by Nordic Welfare Center, together with the Nordic Network for Education for Newly Arrived Students. But before we dive in, I would like to ask my colleague Kaisa Kepsu, Senior Advisor at Integration Norden, to open up a bit more about why we're actually here today. What is the history?
Thank you, Mikaela. Nice to be here. The ambition of the Nordic country is that all children and youth have a possibility to get a good education. And we're doing okay, but there are still a lot to do when it comes to equal opportunities. The number of children with different cultural and linguistic background have increased significantly in the last decades. And therefore, it's really important to focus on education and language learning of the local languages. That is crucial for being able to participate actively in the new society, to thrive. And also, it's human potential that we cannot afford to lose in the Nordic countries, both on an individual level, but also on a societal level. So the educational system should be able to provide good language education and development for children with migrant backgrounds. So that's what we will discuss today.
Well said.
Well said,
Yeah.
yes. And I could also add that it's the background, you asked about the history, the background is from the 2023 when the Nordic ministers for education met in Reykjavik and discussed this matter and wanted to highlight that and said we need to invest in language development among migrant children. So they called for more action and cooperation and knowledge, and that's what we want to bring here.
Yeah.
And we're also really happy to have some extra researchers. We have done an analysis of the systems, the governmental structures, the models for language development, but we also have we are pleased to have some distinguished scholars who have expertise in this area to dive deeper into this.
Great, and we're going to do that today. Thank you, Kaisa.
Thank you.
We are going to hear 4 researchers today talking about what's working well in the Nordics today and where we could possibly step up and do better when it comes to multilingual classrooms. And during the presentations, you may ask questions to the researchers in the chat. We have a chat room. And my other colleague, Trine Andersen, also Senior Advisor at Integration Norden, will take care of the chat for you. I have Trine here with me. Trine, what can we expect in the chat?
Nice to meet you. The chat will be open from now on. And please ask any questions, or if you have any thoughts, any reflections about the subjects, please feel free to share those as well. I'm going to be there to answer what I can and to collect them for the speakers so we can include them in the panel later or after the presentations. Besides that, the chat is also going to be a very good opportunity for networking with individuals who also have the same interest as you. So feel free to share who you are, what you're working on, around this subject right now. And also, if you have knowledge about any knowledge banks that might be useful, or any programs, anything like that, that might be useful for the other participants to know about, share them in the chat. We will be there, and I will be there to answer any questions.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Trine. And after each presentation, there will be room for a couple of questions for the researchers. And also in the end, after all 4 presentations, we will have a panel discussion. And then I will try to include your questions as well from the chat. In the very end today, the Nordic Network for Education for Newly Arrived Students will give their reflections upon the subject and from what we have heard today, the discussions and so on. So yeah, that's it for me. One more thing I could actually tell you. The whole webinar will be in English, but if you feel you need subtitles, there is a possible way to get that. There is a caption called Show Captions CC in your Zoom view. You can press that and you will get AI generated captions, which is not maybe the best, but you can live with them. And this webinar is also recorded, so we will publish it on our YouTube channel later on, and we will then have like professional English subtitles on that version as well. That's it for me. Let's get started. I would like to invite Professor Nihad Bunar, Department of Special Education, Stockholm's University, to the stage, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. And first of all, I would like to say many thanks to the Nordic Welfare Center for the kind invitation. It's a great honor being here today. I have only 20 minutes for my presentation, so it will be a little bit of summary of the research that me and my colleagues have been conducting for quite some while now about mainly newly arrived students and conditions for their education and learning, mainly in Sweden, but also we have been doing research in some other countries. And that's also a main area of my research, migration and education, how these 2 great, huge social phenomena are interacting and affecting each other. So the title of today's webinar is The Role of Language for Inclusion. And I will try a little bit to set up a stage and give you a little bit of broad introduction to these huge areas, learning the language, learning the second language, and not least inclusion. So as a researcher, I am reading a lot of literature from all over the world, and I have from time to time encountering different definitions about this concept of inclusion. And of course, there are many different definitions here. What does it mean? Who is responsible? What are the effects? And so on. But one of the best definitions I have encountered so far has come from newly arrived students that me and my colleagues have been interviewing, and virtually all of them are in one or another way coming back to this becoming just like anybody else when we ask them about their dreams, their aspirations, their fears. They say, you know, we just want to be like anybody else. Many of them are also using the word normal. We want to be normal. That is just like anybody else. So somewhere I will use this definition, becoming just like anybody else, as temporary, provisional, overarching definition about the concept of inclusion, and try to get back to this from time to time when we move forward through my presentation. The first question, of course, is where and how is this becoming just like anybody else taking place, and how? The first point here is in policy or policy discourses, and inclusion is basically an ideological and political goal, something that we are striving for in our society, something that we want to achieve. And it has been a kind of truth for many decades, not least in the wake of Salamanca Declaration back in 1990s, that we are inclusive societies, or that we are striving for that, and we want to our education system to be as inclusive as possible. But nonetheless, what we have witnessed for the last couple of years, not least in this country, Sweden, is more and more critical perspective on inclusion from the leading politicians and policymakers, blaming seemingly inclusion for all kinds of problems in education. Low achievement, children not getting appropriate support, disciplinary problems, and so on and so forth. So the question, has been a notion that inclusion has gone too far. So my question for each one of you to think from your position where you are in the system and in the country is, has inclusion really gone too far? Have we ever really tried to set up a truly inclusive system? So we are blaming inclusion for all kinds of problems in our educational systems. And I'm not really sure that we can agree really what inclusion means in this context. So the question about where inclusion is taking place, if we go back to scientific literature, you will always come back to shared physical spaces. And I'm going to say that there is no inclusion without shared physical spaces. At least a segment of that has to be provided so that children can come close to each other, they can forge strong social relations, the values, the language, the norms, and the cultures are being disseminated and learned and so on in these interactions. So shared physical spaces are necessary, but the question is, are they sufficient for achieving what we call inclusion? But provisionally, we need shared spaces, physical spaces, if we're going to talk about truly inclusive educational system. And then what we have seen, which is maybe the most pernicious understanding of shared physical spaces, is that everything has been reduced to this aspect. The entire concept of inclusion has been reduced to physical spaces. So we put all the kids in the same classroom, in the same school, and then we say, we have achieved inclusion. That's it. Swim or sink policy. Children will sink if they are completely newly arrived without appropriate support. So that's the second thing. We need to combine shared physical spaces, classrooms and schools, with individually tailored support, starting with identifying the needs of every individual child. It's also a matter of working to remove barriers in wider school context. In countries where newly arrived children, asylum seekers, children without proper documents don't have access to education system, there is a talk that we need to remove those barriers and grant them legal access to education. In our Nordic countries, these children have access to education. So here we are talking about removing barriers in wider school system, wider school context rather, in terms of school culture. That is, all these barriers that are being set up, not formally, but informally, for true inclusion of these children. Bullying, exclusion, discrimination, racism, and so on and so forth. So we need to work in removing away those barriers in wider school context. At the end of the day, inclusion is also a matter of subjective perception and individual practices, asking children, do you feel included? Do you feel just like anybody else? So it's a matter of individual feelings at the end of the day as well. So that was very briefly, very short about the concept of inclusion and also current political and ideological battles raging, so to speak, around this concept in at least this country and probably many others. So now a little bit about this other huge concept that we have as a topic today about the language, and I understand it as a second language acquisition. So I want to pose a number of generic questions here, and I also want to provide you with some preliminary answers so we can maybe get back to this and discuss and reflect upon later on. So when we talk about second language acquisition and migrants, I just want to underline that migrants are a very heterogeneous category, obviously. So the first question is, do they want to learn second language? That is, migrants or newly arrived children. And I'm going to say my answer unequivocally is yes. There is a motivation and there is an ambition there to do something with your life, to get through the education system, to get a good job, help your family, help maybe your home country, and do something good. There is also an element of forming a new identity. You need a language if you're going to form a new identity in the country. Being accepted, feeling that you are accepted in the country. Do they have capacity to learn a second language, irrespective of social background, eventually traumatic experiences, educational background, migration status, cultural differences, etc., etc.? You see, I'm not talking here about children with, let's say, language impairments or cognitive disabilities. I'm talking here about those aspects, those factors that we usually attach to newly arrived children. Oh, they are poor and they have eventually traumatic experiences. They have uncertain migration status. Oh, there are so huge cultural differences here. So just want to say, in spite of all these factors, do they have a capacity to learn? And I'm going to say yes. So here we have these individual prerequisites. I would like to argue for acquiring second language. Do they have opportunities, or rather appropriate opportunities, to learn second language? My answer is yes, many cases, but not always. Do schools provide adequate support to learn second language? Yes, in many cases, but not always. So the point I want to make is that the acquisition of second language is not just an individual enterprise. It's also a pedagogical and social practice embedded in wider school policy context. So if we move on to this very, very simple model about learning second language and remembering that what we've been talking about learning the language being not just individual enterprise, but also something embedded in the wider context. So I ask, what is needed to learn second language? Once again, very, very simple model, but nonetheless, the efficient one, I would like to say. So the first thing is what you need to learn second language. And believe me, this comes from someone who arrived as a refugee 30 years ago as a young boy to this country and went through all these steps and learned the hard way. But it's also based in appropriate research. So of course, you need hard work. So I don't want to relieve an individual from the responsibility. At the end of the day, every individual child has to sit down and do that homework. Invest a lot of energy and a lot of time in learning those grammatical rules, words, and so on. So hard work is needed. But yes, but is it enough just to work hard? You need something else, of course, if you're going to invest a lot of energy and a lot of time in learning the second language. You need motivation. And motivation for me is not an exclusively cognitive category, something that you master in your own brain. If you just motivate yourself, that's going to be fine results. You're going to be very motivated. You're going to work 12 hours with learning grammatical rules. It doesn't work really like that. For me, motivation is primarily a social category, which means if you're going to master motivation, you need to see meaning in what you are doing so that you can invest these 10 hours in learning grammatical rules per day. And meaning comes from why you are learning, that you need to see opportunities, that you need encouragement, that you need confirmation from your surrounding in schools and peers and so on. So meaning is a social category, feeding motivation, and motivation is feeding into your hard work. Of course, you need also to trust your own abilities, not to give up. So these are, let's say, once again, at the individual level. And then we talk about the opportunity that I mentioned in the previous slide here. You need the opportunity. An opportunity for me is in organized and informal learning. Organized learning, of course, is in schools, preschools, upper secondary schools. Informal learning is with the peers. And here we are coming back to these shared physical spaces. You need peers who master the language, so you can practice, you can repeat, you can get support, you can get encouragement. So it's not just providing these spaces for learning, these opportunities. You also need a strategy. You need a pedagogical strategy, which is embedded in organized learning, that is having teachers who are skilled so they can help you to acquire the language, help you to move forward. They can challenge you when it's needed to challenge you. They can support you when it's needed to support you, and so on. So what we need is a pedagogical strategy to acquire the language. I was at a conference last week where a number of my colleagues and other researchers presented their findings about reading aloud for children in the preschools, talking about organized learning and strategy. And they realized when a preschool teacher is engaged in spontaneous reading aloud from books for the children, the results are much smaller for children's language development and learning the new words than when teachers had prepared a strategy for reading aloud from books from the children, so they can stop and ask questions. They know where they are going with this text, they can challenge children a little bit, and so on. So this is just one practice, reading aloud for small children, but there are significant differences in the results, effects, outcomes, depending on if you have prepared it as a strategy or if it is something that you are using spontaneously. That is a child approach to say, can you please read to me from this book? So we need these strategies in organized learning, but also there are individual strategies, individual practices and choices children are making. And here is just to give some flesh to these bones. This is a quotation from a newly arrived student. She was at the time of the interview 14 or 15 years old, interviewed by one of my PhD students about these individual practices and choices when you are having access to shared physical spaces to better learn the language. She said, it's not funny to be a newcomer, but you kind of, when you start, you have to dare to talk. To dare to understand and not be afraid that everyone will look at you and you don't know Swedish or something. So no, you should dare to talk because the teacher sees it and he tries to help you as much as he can. And all the newcomers, most of the newcomers are friends with the other newcomers, but not me. I usually hang out with those who already know Swedish so that I can learn Swedish faster. So this is kind of encapsulated individual strategy and choice to get involved in peer relations. And so you can repeat, you can practice, you can get support and encouragement from your peers. Of course, a necessary condition here, precondition, is that you have access to the peers who speak Swedish. So what hinders opportunities and strategies? We say, we need organized learning, organized strategies, and so on. What hinders? The first of all, segregation and enrolling newly arrived children in disadvantaged schools. I've seen that in this country many times, and I've seen it in other countries. I just published an article about kombinationsklasse in Norway, when we saw that these children were placed in upper secondary schools where basically a majority of children already enrolled there in ordinary classes. They were migrants and nobody was satisfied with this order of things. So segregation and enrolling in disadvantaged schools is a hinder is a barrier for newly arrived children, because they need to deal with their own challenges at the same time as they need to deal with the challenges the school as a whole is facing on the educational market. Education exclusively in own classes, just placing children in separate educational settings and having them there for a number of years, you can't do it. You need to have bridges with ordinary education as well. And in the countries where we have early tracking, like in Germany, in the Netherlands, it's also a problem when these children didn't even have a fair chance to show what they can, and they are already being put on a certain educational track where they are 10, 11, 12 years old, and they are locked in the system. We don't have it in our countries. Hope no politician will come up with an idea that we now need early tracking and we're going to get rid of inclusion because it's good for education. No, it is not. Indiscriminate use of collective organizational and pedagogical models, that is treating newly arrived as one homogeneous groups and saying now we want inclusion, so we have abolished all pull-out classes, all separate schooling. We're just going to put everybody in ordinary classes. That's for me collective organizational model. Maybe some of these children need something else. So the point is you need always to start with individual needs and circumstances of every child. Deficit understanding of migrant children and low expectations, like they are unwritten sheets, they don't know anything, they don't have any language, so we need to start build them up from the very beginning. That's not correct. They have always knowledge and at least one language with them. That's something that we need to build upon. Poorly educated teachers and chaotic school organizations. I have in my career been in many schools and doing research, and sometimes you're coming to a school, it's really chaotic school, and the principal and teachers say, you know, we have 20 newly arrived students and we have problems. And I was like, guys, you have bigger problems than these 20 newly arrived students. You have problems with your school organization. You have problems with relations between the teachers and parents. You have problems with school culture, with your own skills. Don't blame these children. Lack of understanding what support is needed, and even stigmatizing representation of the first language. First language is not a hinder or an obstacle. It's something that needs to be harnessed for learning the academic subjects and even the second language. Very briefly, what promotes opportunities and strategies? Yes, we are back to the concept of inclusion, becoming just like anybody else. We need shared physical spaces. We need individually tailored support. We need to work to remove barriers in the wider school and even society context. But we cannot adhere to colorblind pedagogy, saying everybody is the same and we don't see differences between our children. Yes, on the basis level of human rights, but these children have different circumstances, different backgrounds. So we need always to recognize what do they need and start building our strategies on that. Plan transition from separate to ordinary classes. This is very much a crucial moment. If children are placed initially in separate classes and now going to be just a sudden move into ordinary classes, you need to prepare it. You need to have communication and interactions between the teachers on the early stages, and you need to make sure children have made repeated visits into ordinary classes. Harnessing and using the first language, for example, through multilingual classroom assistance, helping children to gain the academic subject knowledge on their first language, and then at the same time working with developing the second language. We can't just work on acquiring the second language and later on we will come back to the academic subjects. 3, 4, 5 years, they will lose a lot of time. Maybe some of them will never be able to come back to mainstream educational system. We need to tap into or lean onto the students' will to learn. A lot of motivation and a lot of ambition from the beginning. And we see after a year that start declining. Well-educated and skilled teachers supported in their role by local administration and cultivating a positive future outlook among these children. I am very well aware that these are no revolutionary suggestions whatsoever, but at the end of the day, these are the basic requirements. Whatever we do, whatever fancy pedagogical second language learning model we identify and import into our educational systems, it can't work if we do not have satisfied or lived up to these basic requirements. And finally, final words. Rights, needs, obstacles, and beyond. A little bit summary of what I have been talking about. Educational needs cannot be solely reduced to a linguistic issue of a second language acquisition. Newly arrived children must be recognized as learners, not just as language learners. The obstacles cannot be solely located in inadequate and interrupted schooling, the age at a time of migration, how old they were, real or imagined cultural differences, parents' socioeconomic background, and educational attainment. The rights cannot be solely reduced to legally granted access to schools, and they cannot be allowed to remain solely ideological declarations on equity and inclusion. Migrants and refugee students bear experiences and a set of previous knowledge that must be recognized and taken as a starting point for their future further education. And to recognize and transcend migration background, you can say, I don't care which country are you from, how long you have been here. We need to recognize that, but we need at the same time to transcend migration background. It's a fine-tuned balance teachers must master to ensure academic success of their students. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Nihad Buna. Thank you so much. It was super interesting. What aspect of your research do you consider the most important for policymakers? If there's like a few things that you would like them to take from this session?
I would say it's very difficult to say this is more important than that one. And one of my points is that there is a package. And inclusion is a package. If you start opening it up and say, this suits my interest, my knowledge, my economy, and we're going to do that. But this is very difficult. Maybe it's not important. We're going to put it aside. And then you work with that definition of inclusion for quite some time, and they say inclusion doesn't work. But you didn't work really with inclusion. You were working with something else. Let me just give you one brief example. One of my PhD students wanted to study the effects of having children placed directly into mainstream classes and those who have been placed into separate classes. So he went to one schools that use separate classes, say, why you are using this model? They say, because we are for inclusion. Great. And so he went to schools that's using direct placement, mainstream classes. Why are you using this model? Because we are for inclusion, they said. So they are completely different models, but everybody was for inclusion. That's why we called our article, Do Both Get It Right? So the point is, I would also like to go a little bit beyond this concept. Oh, we're going to get rid of inclusion. Inclusion is the silver bullet. No, it's not. Everything depends on what you put practically into that concept while you are implementing it. Because remember, teachers are not just policy interpreters, those who are enacting it in practice. Teachers are also making policy while they are enacting it. There's a lot of flexibility, so they are changing, they are reforming, and nobody is reacting. So the crucial point is, how do we implement these good policies that we anyway still have in our Nordic countries?
Mm-hmm. And how do you think this works today in Sweden? Do you have any concrete examples?
No, this was one example with these schools, they say, we are all for inclusion, but they were doing completely different things. And then we say, okay, we're going to go beyond the concept. We're going to go beyond the ideology and policy documents, and we'll see what they are doing. And then you see, do they have shared physical spaces? It doesn't have to be direct placement in mainstream classes. It could be that children are placed in the same corridor. So they have separate classes, but in the same corridor as other peers. So they can come together during the breaks. Do they have a multilingual classroom assistance? That is teachers who speak or assistants who speak their native language so they can support them during this sensitive transitional period. What is the discourse about these children in schools? Do all teachers consider them as being their students, or it's something for teachers in Swedish as a second language and mother tongue teachers? I, as a teacher in mathematics, I have nothing to do with language and content integrated learning because I just teach mathematics. Really? These are students to all of us and the concern for the entire school. That's why you need to have this, as we call it inclusive culture, to embrace these children, not something that is making problems for us teachers in our work, but our students that need our undivided attention and good practices.
Thank you so much for now. You will join us again for the panel discussion later on. Thank you, Niharpana.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we will continue with a pre-recorded presentation. We have the next researcher is Sabine Wollscheid. And since Sabine couldn't join us live today, we have made her pre-record this next presentation. Let's see if we can see it soon. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Sabine Wollscheid. I'm a researcher at the Nordic Institute for Studies in Innovation, Research and Education in Oslo. I'm originally from Germany, where I did my PhD in sociology. I have been living in Norway for more than 17 years. To learn Norwegian as a second language was crucial for me to get a job and become fully integrated in society. But learning Norwegian fluently took time, even though German and Norwegian language share similarities. In the following, I will present core findings of a research review on student second language learning in the Nordic countries that was commissioned by the Nordic Welfare Center. The following research questions were addressed by the review. What programs are used in the Nordic countries to facilitate second language learning and compulsory and secondary education, in addition to other secondary outcomes? How do these programs work and for which groups of students? What is the role of the first language learning in second language learning? And what is the role of B or multilingual instruction in other subjects for second language learning? What are differences and similarities in second language learning for different groups, for example, according to age, country of origin? The topic of this review is broad and complex. On this slide, I provide some key terms and their abbreviations and definitions, how they are used during the presentation. For example, I will spell out first and second language learning, but I will use the abbreviation on the slides. The research review is informed by a systematic review methodology. That means that I applied a scientific method to identify, select, analyze, and summarize studies that qualified for inclusion. To design the search strategy and to select studies for inclusion, the following criteria were used. For example, the review included studies that addressed students with foreign language backgrounds in compulsory and upper secondary education. Studies addressing different programs were included. That means national programs to support language acquisition, first language programs to facilitate second language learning, introductory offers, bilingual programs including first language learning, and pedagogics that intertwined with national language policies. But programs that only supported first language acquisition were excluded. Special needs education, and programs supporting second language acquisition of preschoolers, for example, or pedagogics, for example, digital tools for second language learning. The review included also studies that were published between 2014 and 2024 and included studies with different study design, both qualitative and quantitative studies, whereas studies with a causal design were given priority. I will now present some core findings. First, some overall findings. Overall, 16 studies addressing second language learning were identified and included. These studies described various programs addressing students with foreign language backgrounds directly and indirectly. The complexity of these studies is reflected by different educational systems in the Nordic countries, different study designs. They applied both causal and non-causal designs. It's difficult to draw clear conclusions, and different target groups. So it was a challenge to synthesize findings across individual studies that were conducted in different contexts. According to the programs, the studies included that were introductory offers, language introductory offers, separate classes for newly arrived students, translanguaging or multilingual programs, and bilingualism and first language support. Also, the population was very heterogeneous, student populations with foreign language backgrounds, newly arrived students with different backgrounds and lengths of stay. In the following, I will concentrate on studies with a causal design where possible and present findings for individual countries. For Denmark, we identified 3 studies and 3 of 5 studies with a causal design. These studies measured the effect of first language learning or first language removal on second language learning or other outcomes. Mixed effects across the 3 studies were found. Anderson et al. 2017 found no visible effect of first language learning and foreign students' linguistic abilities in Danish as a second language, but some positive effects for student well-being and parent engagement. The second study by Anderson et al. 2022 found positive effects for reading skills in Danish as a second language, applying an asset-based approach, drawing on the assumption that the first language is an asset for learning the second language. And the third study found that the removal of the first language due to reform had a negative effect on grades in Danish as a second language for male students, but not for female students. According to an asset-based approach, I can say for me was to speak German as a mother tongue was definitely an asset to learn Norwegian because the 2 languages share similarities. But this can be different for different languages. For Sweden, one study by Bieland et al. 2023 found consistent effects of age of acquisition, but only limited effects of bilingualism on second language learning. The age of acquisition seems to be the primary determinant of second language ultimate attainment, but bilingualism might have a certain effect on some linguistic domains. They looked at 4 groups of students: monolingual first language speakers of Swedish, simultaneously bilingual speakers of Swedish and Spanish, sequentially monolingual second language speakers of Swedish and Spanish, adoptees, and sequentially bilingual speakers of first language speakers of Spanish and second language speakers of Swedish. So here it's important to consider the heterogeneity among students when measuring effects of bilingualism. The authors address limitation in the small sample size, which made it impossible to consider different student groups. For Iceland, one study was found, and this study studied Icelandic proficiency of a larger group of school-aged second language learners over time. Icelanders as a second language learners on average were lagging significantly behind first language learners in their performance of Icelandic language. But they pointed to that second language learning in a school context is time-consuming and not automatically successful. And the poor mastery of second language Icelandic of a large group of second language students compared to first language students does not imply language impairment, and it only reflects part of the overall language knowledge. For Norway, we didn't identify the studies with causal effects, but we identified a large evaluation study combining different designs to get in-depth knowledge about the education situation of young people between 6 and 24 of age that were newly arrived students in Norway. Teachers and school leaders that were surveyed pointed to advantages of separate classes for newly arrived students. It was criticized that the curriculum in English was missing for students who never had English, and the importance of teachers' competencies in second language Norwegian was stressed. But there was also high variation in how municipalities organized education for newly arrived students, and also variation was found between schools in supporting newly arrived students. To provide some concluding remarks with implications for further research, we can conclude there are few rigorous studies with causal design measuring the effects of programs on second language learning in the Nordic countries. But overall, these 16 studies we identified, among them 5 with causal design, they were characterized by a heterogeneity of student groups, different programs, different country contexts. So it's difficult to draw a clear conclusion, which makes overall policy implications impossible. For implications, more research is needed. Especially, we need more studies with a causal design to can measure effects of programs on different student groups, where this is if this is possible. And to move forward, stakeholders need to collaborate to obtain a better databases on students' backgrounds and language proficiency, and in particular, newly arrived students. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sabine. Since Sabine couldn't join us live today, I have invited Anna Mikander, Senior Advisor at Education and Research at the Nordic Council of Ministers Secretariat in Copenhagen, to join us today and give her reflections upon this presentation. So Anna, what would you like to highlight from Sabine's presentation?
Thank you, Michaela. And I'd like to first and foremost thank Sabine for a very thought-provoking review and presentation. Maybe the biggest takeaway for me or for the as a Nordic civil servant working in a Nordic setting is it became quite clear that the Nordic countries share a common education policy promoting multilingualism and inclusion, but that the national approaches are very varying in practice. But however, the diversity of these different programs in the countries and also the varying student population does make it difficult to draw firm conclusion, as Sabine mentioned, but it also does open up opportunities for shared learning and innovation. So sharing best practice. It was stated that more effective measures are needed to support second language learning, specifically given the very varying backgrounds and needs of the students. One example for the possible solution I thought that was also highlighted is a call for better data systems to track and support these students, where Denmark is highlighted as a positive example. And this would be something maybe that the other countries could learn from. Another good suggestion from the report was to invest more in collaborative research, which we are also trying to do more at the Nordic Council of Ministers, to make the Nordic region to be a leader in creating equitable and effective education for all learners. I also like to point out the fact that the Nordic approach also allows for the development of scalable, inclusive solutions that respect national context while leveraging regional strengths.
Mm. The Nordic Council of Ministers actually commissioned this report by Sabine Wollscheid. In a broader sense, what can be done in the field of the framework of official Nordic cooperation? What could be the next step?
Yeah, well, there is a big Nordic ambition to ensure quality education for all, which might not be actually the practice at the moment, which also means that there is a shared Nordic need to raise knowledge about these issues. And we are steered, the Nordic official cooperation is steered by the cooperation program. So that is something that actually we follow quite firmly. And this cooperation program, which runs from 2025 to 2030, does prioritize basic skills and addresses the declining in learning outcomes. This includes the strengthening of basic skills, democratic competence, critical thinking, and digital literacy, and also reducing exclusion from education through early interventions, among other things. This program is backed up by an action plan, which is which goal it is to concretize the goals in the cooperation program. And one specific thing in the action plan is to tackle the declining learning outcomes. And there we have written that it's crucial to analyze contributing factors for these declining learning outcomes, and that is such as school environments, demographic changes, and framework conditions through Nordic surveys and research. We also had recently a Nordic Council recommendation that recommended us to call for a Nordic education network to support ministers improving student performance. And with that in mind, we have now actually established a steering group that will lead a project whose goal is to investigate causes of declining learning outcomes and discuss solutions with education sector stakeholders, possibly offer recommendations, both Nordic and national, and the focus areas include socioeconomic background, immigrant background, weak second language skills, demographic and societal factors. So there is a clear connection there between the report and the work that we are forwarding.
It sounds very promising. Thank you, Anna Mikander, and we're looking forward to hearing more about the next step then. But thank you for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next researcher up today is Maria Alholm from Helsinki University. Please welcome, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and warm thanks to the Nordic Welfare Center for the kind invitation. So I come from the University of Helsinki, Faculty of Educational Sciences, and my role there involves training teachers and conducting research on Finnish as a second language and multilingualism in education. And today I have this opportunity to share some insights on how policies are translated into practice in multilingual classrooms across Finland, and I aim to do so within the next 15 minutes. If statistically average classrooms existed, in a classroom of 20 students, we would expect to find 16 Finnish speakers, 1 Swedish speaker, and 3 speakers of other languages, specifically 1 Russian speaker, 1 Arabic, and 1 Ukrainian speaker. But however, in reality, urban classrooms often comprise like 16 multilingual speakers of various languages, along maybe with 4 bilingual students who have at least 1 Finnish-speaking parent, while there are inland classrooms that typically consist of 20 Finnish speakers. But in both of these scenarios, during the school breaks, we would hear a lot of English or sort of lingua anglia. Well, this rough example shows that developing common policies with help of statistical approximations results in one-size-fits-no-one models that fail to address the unique need of diverse classrooms. Hence, it is really essential to engage in ongoing discussions with practitioners across different contextual settings. This is a Sami flag, and on the right, a map illustrating the various dialects of Finnish. These images serve here as symbols of the inherent foundation for multilingualism in Finland. So in Finland, a small population is living on a vast area, and we have strong regional dialects, and we have Sami, Swedish, Karelian, and Roma communities. Additionally, the distribution of migrant students is highly uneven. So as a researcher, I place great value on the insights gained from contextual ethnographic observations, as they provide, I think, the most profound understanding of multifaceted settings. As part of her PhD dissertation, Salla-Maria Suuriniemi studied teachers' views on multilingualism, and as a supervisor, I participated in the project. And in a survey conducted with 2,864 teachers, we discovered that teachers' attitudes towards multilingualism are more positive in those schools and regions with higher migration rates compared to those with fewer than 5% students from migrant backgrounds. And we also found that teachers in Swedish-speaking schools exhibit a more permissive attitude toward multilingualism than their counterparts in the language majority schools, because Swedish-speaking schools in Finland, they are always minority language schools. So this indicates that teachers who lack experience with multilingualism, they really recognize their lack of tools for effectively addressing this issue. And I think additionally, it also shows that working in a multilingual school context enhances teachers' language awareness and develops their pedagogical skills. And in the same way, teachers in minority language schools possess extensive experience in navigating the differences between L1 and L2 on a daily basis. The third finding we had was that lower secondary school teachers are generally more reserved in their views on multilingualism compared to primary school teachers. And I think this third finding is a bit different because it reveals that subject education teachers who work with older students in grade 7 to 9, they are concerned about their students' abilities to progress after comprehensive school. And there is a pressing need for more subject-specific tools for language-aware pedagogy. This includes not only tools, but also supportive structures, such as language-enriched tutoring, collaboration with resource teachers, and updated materials that are suitable for language learners. But what I really want to focus today is that a very significant pedagogical question that repeatedly arises in education is whether to implement joint or separate classrooms for different learners. Historically, this dilemma has manifested in various forms, including gender, religious affiliation, social class, and the distinction between talented, so-called talented and less talented students. And today we are encountering this issue as a language-based question. Should the language of instruction be taught in integrated groups or separately? And if taught separately, on what basis should this separation be determined? Should we place newly arrived students in joint basic education groups straightforward, or should there be preparatory education groups separately? I have created a 4-field diagram illustrating this together or separately dilemma, just to help my students understand how research and recent survey data and our ethnographic observations indicate that there is no straightforward answer to this issue that really intertwines structural and pedagogical features of education. So above the horizontal line, we represent students' sense of inclusion, while below it reflects their sense of exclusion. And on the right side, we have separate groups, and on the left, we have shared groups. In the positive half, separate groups for newly arrived students or for learners with developing L2 knowledge, they can be beneficial, but they must be integrated effectively. Also, shared groups may be successful under certain conditions, provided that the differentiation is well managed. So this was the positive half. But in the negative half, separate groups may risk becoming isolated, encapsulated kind of migrant groups, which can hasten feelings of exclusion, but also shared group may negatively impact students' sense of belonging if they are left unsupported within the mainstream class. So here you see once more the right side of the vertical line. If we think of the newly arrived students here as a detailed example, and these features, they are picked from our ethnographic fieldwork and a large survey made by the National Education Evaluation Center of Finland. So these are research results. So the separate group can function well if it collaborates with basic education. When the integration lessons are tailored to each member, and often the students feel that this is a safe environment for practicing speaking with other learners of the language. And this works if the teachers are specialized in the early stages of language learning, and also if the support in the students' various native languages are available. But then again, if the group is isolated, this separate group model does not function. So this would mean that there are no integration classes with the mainstream students and no structures for peer interaction with fluent L2 speakers. And there are teachers who are lacking qualifications, like Nihad Bunar already mentioned in his presentation, and no support in various mother tongues, various native languages of the learners. On the left side of this vertical line, we see the ideal that is often called inclusive school. I do not really like the concept of inclusion as a synonym for all joint classrooms, and this slide tells you why. This ideal works well, especially for the youngest in our data. if the differentiation is in conjunction, is well managed. So it works if the teacher, resource teachers, and teaching assistants really form a team, if there is a pre-planned support, if peer communication is systematically supported on a daily basis in that joint classroom, so that the newly arrived students are not isolated there in the mainstream. And the classroom teacher employs language-aware working methods. Classroom teacher is aware of what are the language-aware working methods, and if there is support in the mother tongue of the students available. But sometimes students are just left alone in the mainstream. And then there is often, we can see lack of teamwork between professionals, and there are class teachers who do not know beforehand when they will get some help from teaching assistant or some resource teacher. So it's unpredictable, the levels of support what they get. Teachers might be unfamiliar with the language-aware working methods. They have never been trained to language awareness. And there might be absence of organized peer interaction. And yes, students' own mother tongues, their own languages, they do exist, but they somehow become an alienating factor in the classroom. These solutions also raise the question of individualization in education. So the right side here of the diagram, it emphasizes group belongingness. On the upper half, if there is integration, they are integrated as a group, but without integration, segregation affects the entire group. And in contrast, the left vertical side focuses on individuals. Differentiated time is given to individual students, and if differentiation fails, it is the lonely subject, lonely isolated student who experiences this exclusion. So our research and many research of many colleagues indicates that second language learners benefit from a balanced combination of togetherness and differentiation. Togetherness is essential for linguistic socialization, and this means joint groups and being part of the whole. But however, differentiated time with other learners of language of instruction has found to provide also a safe environment for practice to foster initiative and unlock sometimes students' potential. So in conclusion, I would say that this dilemma of togetherness versus separation, it must be continually addressed in each context. It will not vanish. It is an enduring and complex challenge in education, and consequently, there is no one-size-fits-all solution, but these approaches must be tailored to individual contexts. Statistics alone do not provide answers to the real questions at hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. This was very interesting. You mentioned that one size doesn't fit all. Models do not work very well in multilingual classrooms. How should the teaching be organized to fulfill the students' needs?
Yeah, this really is a difficult question, and as I said, we really have to think it over again in each context separately. So, although we might think that there is a group called immigrated students or migrants, but it is so heterogeneous group that we really should maybe not be talking about a group. So I think the best answer to this is educated teachers who really can listen and who really can adjust their teaching to different learners.
Yeah, and understand the environment
Yeah.
they're working in.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Mm.
What is your key message to policymakers working on this issue? What would you like them to take from this session?
I think my my key message could be maybe that we really need to keep up the good level of teachers. We especially at least in Finland, we still have lots of talented students who want to become teachers, and they do their master level degree, and we maybe do not understand how valuable resource this is. So we are not offering this same quality to our newly arrived students, but sometimes I see that preparatory education groups that are organized for newly arrived students, they have teachers who are not qualified, who is just quickly found from somewhere. So I think we should really keep up the good teachers and quality teaching.
Mm. One more question. Finland is often highlighted for its educational excellence, as we know. Can you give us some key lessons from Finnish multilingual classrooms that could inspire the other Nordic countries, or is Finland very good at this?
Yep, that's a good question. This concept of excellence, it has somehow infiltrated educational discourse from the competitive world of business, and I think that when it comes to basic education, it is a bit absurd. So I would love to change this concept into trustworthiness or something, because I think the best form of excellence for school is a sustainably good everyday school, everyday life. So so I think if we look at PISA, we know that Finland is not so good in multilingual and multicultural education, unfortunately. So we have a lot to learn from other Nordic countries. There are many things we can learn, and one reason is maybe that even though we really often we are proud of our teachers, so we do not provide always these well-educated teachers to the newly arrived. So why?
That's sad.
Mm.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we'll talk later
Yes.
as well in a panel
Yes.
discussion. Thank
Yeah.
you for now,
Thank you.
Maria. And we will continue with the last researcher, which we actually have online today. This was a late minute change since there were no flight from Iceland due to a snowstorm, and Renata is stuck on Iceland, which maybe it's not that bad. Maybe it's good and much more safer to have you there. So how are you, Renata? Do you have much snow?
Hello, everyone. I told you before, Michaela, that we could have Christmas tomorrow. There's so much snow here. It's very unusual. But I'm happy to be able at least to take part via Zoom.
Yes.
And thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So let's give over to Renata Emilsson-Peskova from University of Iceland.
Thank you. My presentation is titled Family, School and Educational Policies for Plurilingual Students in Iceland. I work at the School of Education, and I would like to frame this talk within European policies. In the Motivation Manifesto for the European Day of Languages, it says that learners are empowered by their language learning if they belong to a welcoming and supportive learning community, if they are encouraged to share control of the learning process, and if they are simultaneously users and learners of the target language. And the manifesto calls for the development of a motivational ecology that insists on the equal value of all languages and recognizes the value and benefits of linguistic and cultural diversity. And I think what's happening in the Nordic countries, it aligns so well with what's happening in Europe, Council of Europe, and the European Center for Modern Languages. Another frame for this talk are linguistic human rights. The research by Sue Gulliver and colleagues explored linguistic human rights of children and the gatekeepers' perspectives. And the conclusions were that children's linguistic human rights remind us that language is a subgroup of other inalienable rights, and they are all key to children's full and holistic development. Our findings suggest that the gap between policy, rhetoric, and practice allows violations of children's linguistic human rights, creating contexts in which linguicism or language racism is made acceptable. And the gap between policy and practice can be addressed through an explicit human rights focus in teacher education and state funds aimed at supporting and monitoring local rights-based approaches. Just to explain, this is not an easy concept. So linguistic human rights in the Universal Declaration of Linguistic Rights says that they are both individual and collective at one and the same time. And then there's the principle that the rights of all language communities are equal and independent of the legal or political status of their languages as official, regional, or minority languages. And I have been concerned with heritage languages. I would like to add them to the group. And then to understand the complexity of the rights and how they are intertwined, the Convention on the Rights of the Child states these rights of the children to protect the child from any form of discrimination, the right to education, the right to learn the language of society, and the right to maintain and use the mother tongue. Then it states the freedom from losing the mother tongue. And the third framework, and that's the Nordic framework, is a research that we did a couple of years ago. Maria Alholm, my dear colleague, was one of the authors. And we looked how all the Nordic countries are providing for L2 or second language learning, mother tongue learning, and what provisions they offer to newly arrived students. And these approaches were framed within social justice perspective. This article is online in open access, so it's easy to read it if you like. But what we found is that there is a common Nordic dimension in the policies. The Nordic countries demonstrate an ambition to provide second language and mother tongue instruction to newly arrived students. However, the provisions differ. And we conclude that if the countries want to implement a social justice perspective, they provide more for second language instruction, first language instruction, and for the newly arrived students. In other words, the more you do of all these three categories, the closer you get to the ideal state of social justice. And here below is a definition of social justice as a view that everyone deserves equal economic, political, and social rights and opportunities. And there is also this subjective dimension to be respected. And I would add to be able to participate and to have the feeling of belonging. And now we zoom into Iceland. Icelandic education policy is based on principles of inclusive education and aims to provide equal opportunities to learn and study for all students. Schools face challenges in meeting the language and educational needs of students who learn language, Icelandic as a second language, and their educational attainment is below that of their Icelandic peers. And however, the school's responses could also lead to discriminatory practices if they negate the students' human rights. And and if they prevent them from active participation in school and society. So there is a gap between policies and practice. And Eva Hardardóttir, a colleague, she talks about an Icelandic educational paradox. So in one way, the society focuses on democratic and inclusive values in the education, inclusive school, joint classes, equitable social and economic situation. And on the other hand, there are all these competitive neoliberal, neoconservative issues in the underlying ideologies, where Iceland wants to be competitive, individual competence is highlighted, and it leads to separation and exclusion. We have some very good policies in Iceland, very supportive of linguistic and cultural resources that include collaboration with families, that include plurilingual approaches to learning in schools and leisure system. We have inclusive policies, and the newest is this culture welcoming of students and an education group that is connecting institutions, connecting school levels, connecting the capital region with other regions of Iceland, doing a great work. And there is a new website as well that I recommend to look at. To explain the concept of the language policy, we rely a lot on Spolsky, who divides language policy into ideology, management, and practices. But I find very useful also the ideologies and attitudes towards sign languages by Krausnecker, because I think they could be also transferred to immigrant languages. There are the devaluing ideologies, the audistic ideology that I would compare to maybe how we perceive foreign accents, disability paradigm, like second language education even recently has been part of special education. Then there's the economic paradigm. Let's drop mother tongues because they are not of economic value. And then the deaf people, their perspective is, this is a gain. This, it's gain to be deaf. Let's reverse. Let's just look at it as an asset. And then I would like also to bring in two other concepts, family language policy and school language policy, because these are concepts that we are promoting a lot in Iceland. My dissertation was about 5 plurilingual children who attended heritage language classes. They learned their languages in Saturday schools organized by volunteer associations, non-governmental, non-profits. And these children had very positive view of all their languages, even though they didn't master them all to the same degree. They had very strong plurilingual identities, and they had different connections to all of those languages. Safira, the girl in the middle, she showed high agency in language learning and learning at school. She developed friendships in all languages. Icelandic was a gate to peers and to learning for her. And she was also very, very proud of her Thai origin. And she had a vision to become a teacher in Iceland. So her future and the motivation that she had was really high. And the study emphasized the importance of all languages for students and the need to reflect them in their learning spaces, and the valuable roles of heritage language schools and strong family language policies to counterbalance the monolingual focus of compulsory schools. So for the schools, I recommend valuing all students' languages and their plurilingual identities. Plurilingualism is an educational value. Strong family language policies, heritage language schools, they counterbalance the monolingual focus, allow the students to develop all their languages in safe spaces. Equitable relationships and effective communication between teachers and parents positively contributes to students' learning. And this study proposes that schools and teachers systematically adjust their practice to show respect to plurilingual identities and plurilingual needs of the students. I would like to move on to this more recent research, language policies and practices of diverse immigrant families in Iceland and their implications for Education, led by Hanna Ragnarsdóttir. The final report with detailed findings is to be found on the website. The objective of the research was to analyze language policies and practices of families, to study educational practices of teachers on all school levels, to deepen the impact on children's education and relationships between these families, their heritage language communities, school principals, and teachers. And there is one article that was already published, and these are the recommendations, but they only represent a small part of the conclusions of the full research. We suggest a systematic integration of students' linguistic repertoires into their learning environments. We suggest bridging between language policies, the principles of inclusivity and social justice, and the school and classroom practice. We advocate for more robust professional development opportunities for teachers, aligning the whole school system to meet the linguistic, educational, and social needs of plurilingual students. And finally, a systematic approach to teacher preparation, professional development of in-service teachers, development of teaching materials, adjustment of curricula, functional support of schools by municipalities and central institutions. These are very, very big claims, but it's a process, right, taking place. And then again, just to maybe talk a little bit about what these terms mean. The goal of inclusive education is to combat inequality and strengthen people's sense of belonging to the school and community. Inclusive education aims to find ways to educate all students successfully, fight discrimination, and it's a system where everyone is an active participant. And we've been currently working a lot with the concept of intersectionality, which is maybe the combination and joint effect of different discriminatory variables in the lives of these immigrant students. If there are more factors that are discriminatory, that would lead to maybe diminishing of their educational chances. So it's very necessary to look at the children through the intersectional perspective. And Jim Cummins did it. I just want to throw this example up for you to understand. He says, often the immigrant students face linguistic challenges, low socioeconomic status of their families, and marginalized status, prejudice, and racism. And he says these are some factors, and here are the evidence-based instructional responses. So what I think is important to distinguish these different variables, address them separately, but also jointly. And to conclude, these are lessons learned from Iceland. We want to create and sustain an open dialogue between parents and teachers about the language and literacy of children. Preschools and schools are encouraged to shape their language-friendly policies to reflect rights, laws, education, and language policies in the country, and voices also of staff, parents, and children. We suggest to value and validate all languages equally, value children's plurilingual identities, and build on the linguistic and cultural resources that they bring to the classroom, to provide appropriate support and also language support as long as it is needed, and to create a culture of communication that enhances the social inclusion. And then assess children and their progress in a just way. Formative assessment, for example, not by comparison with monolingual standards. It's important to monitor their individual progress. We would like to transform schools into socially just, inclusive spaces where children have adults' support to communicate, connect, and build relationships across languages and cultures. And I would like to conclude with the words again of Jim Cummins. He says, if you want students to emerge from schooling as intelligent, imaginative, and linguistically talented, then treat them as intelligent, imaginative, and linguistically talented from the first day they arrive in school. So thank you very much for your attention. There are some references at the end.
Thank you so much, Renata Emilsson-Peskova from University of Iceland. That was super interesting. I'm like, I only see the sunshine behind you and I can only imagine the snowstorm. I see it in front of me. Anyways, Iceland has, in a very short time, I would say, received many migrants and has had to quickly set up systems to promote integration. How is it working in the school settings, and what do you think has been key to making it work overall? And could other Nordic countries learn from this really rapid progress that you have made?
That's a brilliant question. I think what we have is that the policies have been quickly adjusted, and it's an ongoing process. Also, the society shares these social values. You know, they are the underlying ideology, also, of course, battling the other ideologies. There is a lot of flexibility in the schools and teachers to approach students on individual basis and, you know, make those local solutions to local challenges. There is a culture of collaboration, I think, you know, within the schools, across teachers, across levels, and it helps. And we have been developing also the professional development opportunities. And I think teachers, since I came to Iceland, I admired the teachers' will to actually continue their professional development and education. There has been efforts to increase the diversity of teachers as well to meet the different needs of the students. And I think we also live plurilingualism, of course, with English and all the other languages represented.
Mm. Yeah, because many people speak English now. So what if English language becomes more dominant in society and also in the schools? Could that eventually threaten the future of Icelandic?
Right. I don't like the threatening kind of discourse. You know, I really speak for plurilingualism as an asset. We should normalize it. It's a normal thing. People are plurilingual. I also speak about the functional multilingualism. You know, you won't be same as native speaker. That's been criticized a lot, but you need functional level of the languages that you need for your life and work. Iceland is benefiting from this bilingualism. It's criticizing it. You know, there are voices that are afraid of it, but Iceland is hugely benefiting from the whole population being able to speak and understand English. So I'm all for it. I'm all for plurilingualism.
That sounds positive. And one more thing, are there particular policies or local practices in Iceland that have shown good results in involving parents in the language learning?
Absolutely, and I think, you know, one of the good things is that the state supports the local initiatives and parents association. We have Modermál, the Association on Bilingualism, that teaches heritage languages, and these are wonderful language communities creating opportunities for parents and immigrant teachers. We have the bridge builders or cultural mediators that are employed by the Directorate of Education. They're wonderful, you know, mediators in all kinds of situations. We also have cultural ambassadors employed in some neighborhoods that would kind of mediate information between communities and local authorities. So that's some of the examples that I think are good.
Sounds very promising. Thank you so much, Renata, and take care over there in Iceland. We will let you go for now. Thank you for joining us online.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now we have heard all 4 researchers, and I would like to ask Nihad Bunar and Maria Alholm back to the stage with me for some more questions, and hopefully also some questions from the chat in a little while. Let's take this one as well. Let's see if I think it will. Yes, that's better. So, first of all, maybe I would like to ask if you did get any new insights from other Nordic countries today. Have you learned anything from each other? Would you like to start, Nihad?
Every opportunity is a teachable moment. That's what our teachers are doing, using different situations that rise in schools as teachable moments. That's a good pedagogy. Before answering your question, I just want to say one thing that I just came up during these presentations. I've been receiving emails from teachers, local school managers for the last couple of months, writing to me that, oh, it's so quiet everywhere in the society about newly arrived students. Nobody cares about these students anymore. There are no conferences, there are no teacher conferences, there are no professional development, nothing in the newspapers. So is it an effect of the new migration policies that we see unfolding in our countries, or what is it about? So I was so happy that you organized this webinar, so we really can make sure these students are have undivided attention from policymakers, the educators, the researchers, and so on. So I'm really happy for you organizing this conference. Of course, as I said, you always learn something, but it's very much a recognition that we are basically facing at the end of the day, at the bottom of this issue, facing the same challenges, and we are kind of stumbling in the darkness sometimes, but we have so much to learn from each other, and that I think that we should have more joint conferences, more exchange of experiences. We are doing that between researchers. We are doing that probably between teachers, policymakers. But we need to have cross-professional meetings, so we, like you have done today. But we share at the end of the day the same challenges, and yeah, there are some local particularities, but that's what I have got more confirmation, which I knew a little bit about since before, yeah.
But that's also a very good thing that you can see that we have many people who actually work with the same questions, and because like you said, this is where it all starts. And Maria, your reflections.
Yeah, thank you. It has been a lot of information today. I really, as Renata mentioned, we started cooperating with a group of Nordic researchers some years back, and we really wanted to learn about each other's systems and how do the different countries' policies treat newly arrived students, mother tongue or first language learning and second language learning for the migrated students. And we learned that although we have this shared kind of shared values in Nordic countries, so there is lots of variation in our practices, but not only between countries, but also inside each country. Like we also learned that Finland, Sweden, and Norway, at least, they give a lot of freedom to local communities and municipalities to organize many issues related to the migrated students. And I think Finland is a kind of extreme example in this localization, because our national curriculum is kind of very loose outline, and then we have local curricula that are of course in line, or should be in line with the national curriculum, but then there are many decisions made locally. So it's not like an easy task to get to know what is done in Finland, and can I now speak for whole country, and who can speak of all Sweden or Norway.
Mm.
That's also difficult. But I really appreciate these examples from Iceland, because Iceland is very compact, and when something happens, so it seems very like dynamic, and we could list the things that have been done, the good innovations done in Iceland, and just learn.
And really quick as well, like really.
Yeah.
But we heard like all your research now.
Just quickly
of
add
course,
something.
sorry.
Very interesting. It's similar in Sweden, decentralized country. There is one curriculum and there is a school inspectorate and so on. So what has been bothering me is that in some municipalities, they are doing really great work. And in some municipalities, they are not doing that great work. I don't want to use any stronger word. So, and then you have newly arrived students coming from the same countries, same educational background, and ending up in these two municipalities or even schools in the same municipalities, having completely different approaches. So that's by chance. And our educational policy and the opportunities for excellence or succeeding in schools shouldn't be governed by chance. Which school you happen to end up in, is there's a good principal, there are good teachers who understand this. That's completely opposite to what we have been trying to achieve for decades. That is equality, equity. So I don't want I don't want the educational opportunities will be governed by chance. It has to be. Even I understand there are local particularities, but there are so huge differences that it's inexcusable, so to speak.
Trustworthiness is the word.
Yeah.
Not excellence. We have to aim to trustworthiness in basic education.
But it sounds like you're experiencing this.
I understand. I totally.
So there might be
agree.
initiatives that you don't actually know about because it's like locally. But we heard all of your researches, and I'm thinking like, what kind of research do we need, or what kind of research do we want if we think about the next step? What do we lack, and what do we need to sort of move forward and find solutions? Yes, Maria.
Well, what I might already have said this, but I think we need ethnographic work in classrooms so that we can really develop teaching, and we can give more, we can like mean more when we talk about language aware teaching. We know something about it, but we could be more profound. We could be more precise when we expect teachers to be language aware. But we cannot do it without classroom research, and that's time consuming. There are very difficult ethical questions when you go to classrooms, observe, do video recording. And I think these kinds of issues, maybe policymakers could help us researchers with. So it would be easier to go to the classrooms and do videotapings and etc.
It goes without saying that I'm completely, I completely agreed with Maria. Just going to say, we need to underline that at least in this country, Sweden, many things have been done in the last 10 years after the so-called refugee crisis, 2015, 2016, and a lot of initiatives coming from the government, National Agency for Education, local initiatives, and so on. So a lot of projects, a lot of interventions. So what we need to do is a thorough evaluation of these initiatives, these projects, because they have cost a lot of money. So we need to understand, what works here really. I don't think that even people in the municipalities really understand what works. Have been some money coming from the government. Okay, do something for newly arrived. People are doing different things, who had the strongest voice, maybe got his or her way of doing things. So we also need to discern what are the necessary conditions and what are the sufficient conditions in terms of learning the second language, in terms of, if you like, inclusion, in terms of improvement of the achievement and so on. So sufficient, you need it, but necessary, you can't do it without that. So we need to have this foundation, what we need, what are the prerequisites, what we need to provide. And then, of course, schools are different. They also need to position themselves in relations to what kind of school it is, what kind of municipality that is, what kind of history they have, what kind of teachers, but also what kind of course, number one, what kind of students they have.
Yeah.
Definitely. But we need to have some basic foundations for that work. And we need to know what works. We don't know that today, despite hundreds of millions of crowns being invested into different projects.
Good point.
Yeah.
I would like to invite Trine. Come back here. I give my
and
place
ask a question
to
or
you.
two.
From the chat, yes.
Yes, exactly. So it has been raised in both of your presentations that the teacher's ability to teach for students with multilingual backgrounds might be lacking a bit. And what has been raised in the chat is that they see a higher tendency for the teachers to actually be specific subjects, that they only think that the teachers that teach bilingual students are the ones responsible. But maybe we should make a teacher education system where everyone is responsible for actually being able to teach bilingual students. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely right. We should, every teacher is a language teacher. That's what we keep on repeating in teacher education nowadays. But it's not a long time that we have been rephrasing this mantra that every teacher is a language teacher. So it has, we have not yet got it through, I think.
Yeah, there is a methodology for language learning called language and content integrated learning. And that's, if you like, best practice. Has been a lot of research in North America and even in our countries. And I think that is something that all teachers can harness and use in their teaching, irrespective if you are a teacher in mathematics, social science, natural science, and so on. But I think this is a matter of school culture. This is a matter of good leadership in schools. This is a matter of internal discourses in schools, that these students, they need to learn first the second language, so then will come to me, and then I will educate them in mathematical formulas or whatever. It doesn't really work like that, and it's a matter of leadership and collegial learning, cooperative learning in schools, when teachers are involved in this ongoing learning, sharing experiences. But at the centerpiece of all these activities are the students, because teachers are not in schools to teach their subjects to themselves, but to these students and learn them something. I really have nothing against teachers. I was a teacher myself once upon a time, but just gonna say that this is a matter of school culture and leadership. Everybody needs to accept these students as their students. They are not students for someone else. And waiting 4 or 5 years until they have learned the second language and then I may teach them, that's the yesterday story. You have to change it.
Yeah, I still want to emphasize the role of school leadership that also rose up in our nationwide survey for all teachers for the newly arrived students, that in those schools where the school leadership understood the role of multilingual or language awareness in all teaching, I think these schools kind of found they were the total school, the culture, the environment was moved towards more language aware and a positive environment for all students. So I think we really should be training more the school leaders and not only the teachers, who alone cannot so much.
So is that your recommendation for how to start this process? Starting with the leaders and then going bottom up afterwards?
Not starting with the leaders and then wait 5 years and then go further on. I mean, as I mentioned, this is a package. So of course you need to work simultaneously on different tracks. I completely agree. I mean, the role of leadership, if you don't have a principal who understands what is about, it's very difficult for teachers to get through some new ideas and so on. So you need to have proper leadership, properly educated, who understand, properly supported by local municipalities and administrative management there. But you need to work on different tracks with teachers, with school principals, leadership, and so on. So yeah, that's one recommendation. And another one is don't blame inclusion for everything, because that's not correct.
I will say thank you.
And actually, that's the time we have. Actually, 15 minutes goes really quickly. So thank you so much, Maria Holm and Nihat Bunar. It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. And we're not totally ready yet. I still would like to welcome the Nordic Network for Education for Newly Arrived Students to the stage. And as I said in the beginning, hi. We are co-producing this together, so we're hosting it together with you. And with me I have Synne Nordmark Börstad and Frida Bjarne Jonsdottir, did I pronounce it correctly? And let's see, I thought you could start with actually giving a short presentation of who you are, and just tell us short about the network. What kind of network is this?
Yes, I'll tell you very briefly. My name is Synne and I work at the Norwegian Ministry of Education and Research. The network, this year, Norway is chairing this informal Nordic network for education for newly arrived students. The network was established in 2017 as a response to the refugee situation at the time. And we saw a need for a Nordic network to share experiences and to learn from each other. The network consists of country experts from the directorates and the ministries in various Nordic countries, all working with this topic, education for newly arrived students. And I must say, from a Norwegian perspective at least, it's been extremely valuable to have a network where we can learn about the challenges and the measures in other countries. We gained new ideas by learning about measures in our neighboring countries, and we have implemented several measures inspired by our Nordic friends. Yeah.
So it's very good. And now, hearing all these research presentations and also the panel discussions and some questions from the audience, what would you like to take from today? What would you like to highlight from the presentations you just heard?
Yeah, maybe I
yes,
come in here. Well, all the Scandinavian countries are changing. Demography is changing, and the culture of the communities are changing. And we have to respond to that both socially and within the education. And it was really interesting to listen to all the presentations. And I want to go back to what they discussed just now in the panel talk with the school leadership, but also what Bunar said earlier about how some of the municipalities are doing a lot and others are not doing a lot. Some schools are doing excellent work. And in Iceland now we are learning a lot from the other Scandinavian countries through the network and through all sorts of collaboration. And one of the things that we are trying to do is to scale up. I don't want to call them best practices because we don't really know what are the best practices, but effective practices. So that we bring into the learning process of all the countries what is successful when it comes to the participation, inclusion, and citizenship of all the children in the school and the community. And so I think that we can learn a lot from this. And but we have different challenges, but with the collaboration, we can learn from each other. And school leadership is such a big part of this. And as Bunar said now, and Maria, this holistic approach. It's not about the child learning a language and then participating. It's about something that has to start the day the child walks into the school, and we are all responsible. There's a school leadership, there's a municipality leadership, there's a national leadership, and we all bear responsibility. So, and I think that was addressed in all of them.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I can see how listening to this, people from the network were nodding. So I think it was
good.
many very recognizable issues that have been raised today. I think one aspect that all researchers highlighted was how important language education is and adapted language education, and having teachers with competences within second language education. Obviously, but I think like the teacher education and teacher competences is something everyone mentioned and is extremely important. I also like to add the importance to systematically work with second language development. To develop vocabulary and concepts is important for many language minority students, not only the newly read students, and that teachers need to work with second language development across subjects in mainstream classrooms. I think that's very important to succeed. Yeah.
Thank you both. And we will actually hear more a bit later in the report we're going to write. I'm going to tell more about that, but thank you, Frida and Sune, for now.
Thank you.
We have come almost to the end, and I would like the audience who's still with us out there 2 hours later, and of course a big thank you to Victor Boetius. You cannot see him, but he made this stream possible today with video and an ad hoc live stream and all the pictures and things, and also keeping track of the time. So thank you, Victor. We will write a seminar report from this seminar, webinar, and we will publish it on our webpage, integrationnorden.org, and also send it out in our newsletter as soon as it's ready. So if you have not signed up for our newsletter, please do so. And before you leave, please answer our Menti questions. Only 2 questions. We would be very happy if you would do so. You can do that by scanning the code here on the screen, or also in the chat. You should find that one, but at least here on the screen. And yes, I would like to thank you very much on behalf of Nordic Welfare Center and the Nordic Network for Education for Newly Arrived Students. That was it for today. Thank you very much and goodbye.